First of all, there is a possibility that he's not even the father. I was trafficked. What do you expect? I was on the streets. My family was abusive. I was on the run from a trafficker from the state of California. I had some trumped up prostitution charge, solicitation charges. I was on the run, on the streets. I was naive, very young. I didn't speak his language. He speaks Spanish. I speak English, of course. I know Spanish now after being around it. My child was not born out of consent, much less was she born out of any type of romance. There was no romance. How do you have romance with somebody who you cannot understand, who you cannot communicate with? You're vulnerable, on the streets with nowhere to turn, and you're used to being exploited. That is a normalcy. That's normal. Of course, it's violent. Of course, it's terrible. But that's normal. The institutions don't really help us. I was phased and aged out of the foster care system. I was shuffled around here and there. I was locked up JDC, locked up for prostitution charges, solicitation charges. I was vulnerable. I needed a place to rest my head. I needed a place to be sheltered. There was no romance. He's 20 years my senior, coming from Veracruz, Mexico, where he left behind 2 children that are also out of wedlock. He was in his 30s. He impregnated a 14, 15-year-old woman and came here to the States. He owes money to them. He doesn't really take care of them. I would send my money sometimes from being exploited, sending my money that I made with my body. Disgusting, right? We were never married. It was hell. When I had my child, I started putting together the illusion that I was under. I was under an illusion. It's one thing when the abuse happens to us personally. It's another thing when your children can see it. I assumed ignorantly that he would find some form of humanity to care enough about his own flesh and blood. I was wrong about that. I didn't have the resources, nor did I have a support network. Who was I really going to go to? How was I really going to overcome that? With the resources and the limited knowledge that I had. I had little to no resources, no credit history. I knew nothing about anything other than being shuffled around and being abused my whole life. And this isn't a pity party. It just is what it is. I was basically guilt-tripped into having this child based upon religion and ideologies, patriarchal ideologies. I was groomed to be non-existent, really, to be seen and not heard, to be obedient. And through my experiences of not being assisted with anything, any type of protection, any type of attempts to get any type of assistance with any of the trauma was dismissed. What do you expect? What could anyone expect? So it's my fault for wanting to do better with my life. I took the initiative to go work. Entry-level jobs. I would work several at a time. I went and I got a little Honda Accord and I drove myself to work. I would sleep in my car and then go to the next job. And then return home and try to piece together what little bit of normalcy that I had. I didn't get any help financially from him. I mean, he co-signed the apartment that I had, but all of that was quickly destroyed because behind my back, he was contacting my employers, informing them about my prostitution charges, solicitation charges from California, and they found that as a reason to fire me. I was robbed in the alley of the apartment where I stayed, in the city of which I stayed. I'm pretty sure that was staged. When I called the police, they didn't really care. They were more interested in interrogating me rather than trying to get to the bottom of me being mugged and robbed. The little Honda Accord that I had burst into flames on the highway 61 on my way to go to work at Supermom's. It was a rebound job after being laid off from my employers receiving information about my California charges, which really honestly shouldn't even be charges. You have women around this world in these nations that are being incarcerated for the objectification of their bodies. And this is what is considered to be acceptable, legal. It's already abusive. It's already disgusting. It's already suffering. So then you incarcerate what you consider to be prostitutes, and they're really not. They're doing their best to survive with the means that they have, and it's not just as simple as getting a job, because we've tried that. And the fact that all of these vulnerabilities based upon characters, abusers who are they're controlling, and they must have the upper hand, and it's easy for them to do so with this misogyny that we uphold in this culture, in this society. In this society, the culture of misogyny, racism, colorism, classism, and so on, ageism, it hinders a lot of people from being able to excel. And this whole just an unwillingness to comprehend what should be so simple. Nobody signs up. Well, I mean, maybe there's somebody, but I didn't sign up for this. First of all, like I said, 20 years my senior. I don't care if I was in my 20s. I was still young and still pretty much a child. I was not raised in an environment that promoted autonomy, let alone self-respect. We are trained from birth to be animalistic, to be careless, to not even think about ourselves, to think about everyone else except for us, and to tolerate all of this intolerable behavior. And then whenever, like for me, when you stick up for what's right, and in my case, sticking up for myself and not allowing myself to be disrespected so blatantly, and then my daughter, and the simplest of humanity and dignity cannot be found in not one. There's no consideration to even think outside of the box. Instead of just accepting the narrative that is provided for you, which states that I'm a drug addict, mental nutcase, and I must have done something wrong. How could an abuser have your child? Very simple. It's very simple. When you don't have an awareness of rights, and even if you do have an awareness of it, there's no guarantee that the society is going to actually uphold them and apply them to your life. If you can perceive me as someone who is not worthy of so-called protection, or of worthy of accessing liberties and rights, then it's very simple how this could happen. You see, you see the trauma that I'm going through as my fault or my own burden, and make it as if it's my I'm culpable and guilty of someone else's lack of self-control. So while my life was nearly taken because I was sexually assaulted in my apartment and nearly murdered, and I survived that, and I ended up in a hospital, and while at that hospital they drugged me. They had bound me to a stretcher for a period of time because to them I was like delirious. Me yelling and me being upset, and having, I guess you could say, a psychotic episode, and which would have been perfectly qualified in a situation and circumstance where you're bare bone naked with no clothing. You had just been sexually assaulted by a stranger that you don't know, chased, harassed, stalked, and pushed off of a moving train. Your wrists are bent up like paper clips. Your bones are shattered. And limping over to the police because they're too flabbergasted or astonished to find any human capacity within them to actually assist a survivor or a victim and get them to safety. Instead, it was already speculated that I was a drug addict and that I was crazy out of my mind, and I must somehow have deserved the terrorism that I was experiencing. And then to basically go to a hospital and have the professionals there and have not even known me or seen me for more than 24 hours already coming up with diagnosis like psychosis. How do you know that based upon somebody's emotional response to trauma? You automatically assume, how could a professional as educated as they are automatically verify that you have psychosis and possibly be manic and bipolar? That's not enough evidence. Somebody being fearful, somebody being delirious, yelling, upset, that's not a diagnosis. You don't have enough evidence, you don't have enough analysis to provide that as a diagnosis. And then this idea that anyone who has the credentials could never be wrong. This immunity for decision making that has such a huge impact on somebody's life. When you introduce pharmaceuticals or any type of drugs, mood altering stimuli for the brain, there's some things that just are not reversible. So here we have adults who can make decisions that could literally destroy someone's life just based upon their own prejudice, based upon their interpretation of what they are viewing, what they can assume. It's biased at the very least. It's discriminatory, and it just lacks virtue in any type of ethics. You cannot determine someone's diagnosis in less than 24 hours without actually, assessing them properly. And this thing where someone's emotional response is used as a weapon when I was worthy of some patience and some clarification, instead of just jumping to conclusions as to what you think that you're perceiving, what you believe that you're viewing is manic or bipolar. And whether you're wrong or you're right, you don't know. You just don't know. You haven't done an analysis and assessment. You haven't done tests. You just see me upset. You see me having an outburst. You see me naked, butt naked, with wrists bent back like paper clips. And you have no idea what I'm talking about. It sounds like psychobabble. But if you had been assaulted, sexually assaulted, and physically violated, and nearly had your life taken, how do you think that you would respond to that type of event? Would you be very calm and be like, oh no, I'm perfectly fine, I have no pain at all? Or would you be freaking out? So then you see somebody freaking out, and then you jump to the conclusion that they're manic, psychosis, they hear God's voice. You're putting in opinions and false narratives to add more content to that, or context to that. When you are drugging somebody in a hospital setting, and then you document the person under the influence of whatever you have drug-induced them with. So whatever I was under, whatever I was given to, I guess, stabilize me or to keep me more docile, whatever. And then to go on and write down whatever the communication conversation exchanged under the influence of whatever it was that I was induced with. And then to draw a conclusion off of your alteration of me. So yes, I may have came to you in a delirious state of mind after experiencing something so traumatic, because that's terrorism. You nearly lose your life. You've been violated. Your boundaries have been crossed. You don't feel safe. You don't trust anyone. And it would only be proper and make a lot of sense for a vocal outburst and some, behaviors that are chaotic or erratic. That's normal. That's pretty normal. It's not an automatic, you're bipolar, you're manic, you're schizophrenic. You can't jump to that conclusion. Okay? So when you're inducing me, when I was induced with these drugs, and then they go on to try to have a discussion or to communicate with me, That was wrong because, first of all, you're not getting me from my mindset. You've altered my mind by inducing me with that drug several times. And then they form these theories about me saying we couldn't complete the whatever meeting, or we couldn't complete the discussion with the patient because she was incoherent. Well, of course I was incoherent. You just shot me up against my will with some drugs. Of course I'm incoherent. Of course I'm incompetent. The drugs are very strong, very powerful. What do you expect? That's your fault, not mine. I'm incoherent because I'm high. I'm incoherent because I'm high off of whatever you guys were doping me up with while in your facility. And then you cast these judgments. You make these statements that were so derogatory and dangerous to me and my child's life. And then the audacity, while I'm doing my best to get better and heal mentally and physically, at one point even eloping from the facility to get care from a provider that I preferred, which was my right, but that was denied to me, and I was treated like a criminal and hauled right on back to the facility that I had eloped, instead of being able to, be an adult, make a decision and go to the care provider of my choosing and follow up my care there. This facility, the original offenders, who deemed it necessary and deemed their decision superior to mine. And based upon their negligency, their malpractice, and their utter disrespect to my rights and to my entire being and to my entire experience, they went on and made up allegations, biases, false narratives. They lied. They added all types of statements that had nothing to do with the situation at hand, speculating, unprofessional. And it was dangerous because meanwhile, they subjected me, ordered me, forced me through the usage of physical violence, restraining, drug inducing against my will, and the relocating me to a facility that I did not want to be seen in the first place, denying me my right. Okay. So they felt it necessary, acceptable to enforce me to take medications that gave me heart palpitations, that made me gain over nearly 100 pounds, that had such adverse effects to my mental capacity that even to this day have left an impression on me that is irreversible. Not to mention the trust, it's just not there. The same preceding judge who ordered me and found it necessary to commit me to a Jarvis order was the same judge who was on the case hearing of which the abuser who set all of this up, the reason why I was in that hospital in the first place, they gave him full custody. And someone who migrated here, doesn't speak a lick of English, left 2 children behind in Mexico to their mother. He's not married, nor is he married to me. Our children were not born out of wedlock. They were born out of wedlock. They were not born out of marriage. There is no divorce. There's no none of that. There's no alimony. There's no none of that. There's no protections. What benefit would it have been to me, any of this? So while I'm deemed as incompetent, a danger to society, a danger to myself, accused of suicide, as if that's grounds for me to be disrespected and to be violated and to have violence and force used against me. If that's the case, and if we're going with the narrative of which the hospitals wrongfully accused me of, and whether or not any of what they wrote about me, it could even be qualified or to even be accepted or credible, because I was under the influence of whatever they were injecting me with. But yet, it was more essential for them to paint me out to be some drug addict. It was more essential for them to be unprofessional and not perform a rape kit until, like a month later. That was really, necessary. They had kept me at this hospital. Prior to me eloping, I was there for maybe like 3 months. And during that 3-month span, my wrists, because my bilaterals were, both the left and the right, were shattered. They had healed and malformed. So they were malformed because all that time that I spent there and not getting any treatment, just being drugged the entire time, drugged, sedated, and restrained. I was denied opportunity or access to taking a shower. I was told if I didn't shut up, I couldn't use the phone, I couldn't eat. I had to fast because I was supposed to go to surgery, but no surgery ever occurred. So it was this bait and switch thing where I had to basically be starved, couldn't drink any water, because that is the process for surgery. But then they would pull the rug from under my feet, like, oh, well, because you're having an outburst, or because you're upset, or you have the audacity to be upset at something that you should be upset about, like not receiving quality care and not being treated like a decent human being. You're upset, and we can't have you upset, so we're going to drug you. And then you're going to try and do, the professionals at the hospital are going to try and attempt to do a report with me and communicate and interact with me under their drugs. So I'm being drugged, and you want to come do a follow-up with me? How come you didn't do a follow-up with me when I'm upset? And what is this conditioning about? I'm not allowed to be upset. I have plenty of reasons why it's qualified for me to be upset. So, absolutely scandalous. The same judge who ordered me incompetent and was like, oh, you're a meth addict? That's what you see? That's what you're judging me to be? I could care less what the assumption is. But my thing is that either you can follow the policy and you can follow your rules 100%, or don't follow them at all. But then don't come to me when I do what's right by my own child. And then you do this underhanded business with someone who don't have the citizenship even to be here. He has you can look at behavior, okay? You can look at the behavior, look at the actions. It's irresponsible. You're having children out of wedlock with young women. 15 years old, for a 30-year-old, that's too young. Okay, 20 years old, when you're nearly 50, that's too much. But we had a romantic relationship, but you don't know the name of my mother or my father? What type of romantic relationship is this? Is this something that's practiced regularly? Where you could lay down with somebody and have a child by somebody and you don't even know their parents' names? So then you go to the court proceedings. And of course I didn't show up because I didn't receive any due process. I was never served. And even if I had been served, no type of court appearances would have even occurred in the first place because I'm incompetent. You're saying that I'm mentally disturbed, insane, and I can't make my own decisions is what you're saying. So how dare you expect me to be present for your guys' underhanded business involving the danger, endangering of my child? You found it acceptable. You didn't even do a paternity test to establish if he is actually the father. How do you even know he is who he is? Do you have the proper identification? Did you fingerprint him? For all you know, his name could be Mario. So it's just that easy for somebody to walk into the courts and say, hey, this is my kid, and never mind the mother. All the while acting as if you don't know where I am and you don't know how to serve me. Paperwork that I shouldn't even be receiving because I'm incompetent. And then you're going to use my vulnerability and my emotional anguish, my righteous emotional anguish, to being terrorized, assaulted, and violated, something that should be recognized as a crime but is not. It's not being held accountable like it is. Instead, you're going to project that onto me like it's my fault. So you fast forward and all of these disturbances keep occurring. Mind you, I'm trying to get stable, so I don't really have time. I didn't have time back in 2017, 2018, 2019 to really sit and argue and nitpick with this one who did what he did. You know, I took him off child support. And for what? So that he could turn around and be malicious and have it so that my daughter doesn't have a mother. To mistreat her, neglect her, and to leave her in disparity. To allow her to be abused by someone that's not, he's not married to this woman who he lives with. Her son is able to be violent towards her. Nobody corrects him. She's left in a situation where she's vulnerable and has nobody standing up for her. But let's see, 2017 to 2019 to present, I was too busy getting back to being stable. After having been fired from my job wrongfully, maliciously, after somebody did something to the vehicle for where it to burst in flames all of a sudden, sporadically. That's not a coincidence. Me being robbed and mugged in my alley, phone destroyed, okay, sexually assaulted and violated, and then nearly having my life taken from me. And you have the audacity to expect me not to be upset and not to look at you like, excuse me, you're wrong. You're very wrong. You were more concerned and more interested in ensuring that I take medications that are clearly deteriorating my physicality, my mental health, making me worse than what I was. If you're considering my state of mind, you were considering my state of mind to be a danger or to be a nuisance. Because me being upset is a nuisance to you. But see, me being violated by folks who are supposed to be adults, who clearly just dropped the ball and are incapable of implementing any type of reason and sensibility. So the weaponizing of my mental anguish, the weaponizing of my disparity, the weaponizing of my vulnerability as if I wasn't qualified to be any of those. Look, I'm not, resilient, strong Black woman. No, I'm a woman and I feel pain and I bend and I break. I'm a human being. I can feel things. I'm not Superwoman, and it's an insult. I'm deeply offended. I am not okay with this disrespect for my daughter and for me and our truth and this trauma that we've been experiencing needlessly because nobody wants to be responsible. Nobody wants to be honest. Nobody wants to be, considerable. Everybody wants it their way. Everybody wants to be able to control everything, even if it causes harm to another human being's life. And that would be my child. Never mind what she wants. You're going to tell her what she wants. Never mind what our truth is. You're going to tell us what our truth is. And then you're going to punish us for having nerve enough to do what we know internally is right due to other people's inability to assist us when we go to you for help. So I called for a welfare check because this one over here who has my daughter hostage would not answer the phone, would not answer the door. And in my mind as a mother, after my daughter is revealing to me and telling me how she doesn't feel safe, I can see it. I can read the body language. I can see the lice in her hair. I was treating a yeast infection, bacterial infection, and the fact that I would even have to explain this to another group of adults who did not birth her into this world. And then on top of that, just because there's a name on that birth certificate doesn't mean anything. When you're raised in a society where you're taught not to have any value for yourself, and then you want to hold me to a color of law that no one else is respecting, but you want me to abide by it, but no one else is being respectful of it. Nobody else is being respectful of it, or upholding it, or actually following it. Where was the due process? How can due process even occur if I'm incompetent? That means all contracts are null and void. He was never married to me. He has no legal grounds, really, and you have not established paternity. And like I said, how can you clarify or validate his identity? How do you know? How do you know that whatever's on that birth certificate is the person who has my daughter hostage? How do you know? You don't. If it's not illegal, then it was definitely done maliciously, underhandedly, deceptively, which would make it illegal in either way. As to why he's still here in the States, as to why he's here under the poverty line having more children, I have no idea. Under the poverty line, can't afford those other children that he abandoned in one of the top most dangerous places for a woman to be breathing and existing is in Veracruz, Mexico. It's number 2 for femicide. Since 2008 to present, Veracruz, Mexico rates as number 2 most dangerous place, most prominent in femicide. So these are gender specific hate crimes where women are being murdered, raped, abused, violated, and their government doesn't care. And it seems like this one doesn't either. So someone fleeing Mexico to come here, but leaving behind a young mother with his 2 children who he didn't marry, who he's not financially supporting. He's leaving them poor and destitute to come over here to the States to have a child with someone. I was a baby and he was already college age. When I was born, he was already a full-grown man, had already lived an entire life. And you mean to tell me that's romantic? That was a loving domestic relationship? Really? No, it wasn't. It's rape. It's manipulation, it's deception, taking advantage. Because, gee, by golly, I'm a beautiful brown woman who lives in a racist America, who's entirely sexist and misogynistic and classist, who has no problem benefiting off my suffering, has no problem violating me, taking advantage of my sexual organs, but seems to have difficulties, a terrible amount, an extreme amount of difficulties with having any respect, any type of recognition that I'm a human being who was disrespected, violated, and offended, who was unrighteously and wrongfully convicted for a lot of things. I spent all of my life institutionalized. Everybody got to take advantage of me, including the very institution that was quote unquote supposed to protect me. But instead, they seen me as some type of threat, disrespected me, and had no problem assisting someone who had no problem abusing me and my child. So when my child discloses to social workers and to CPS that she's being abused at home, and then it's thrown out and the case is closed because we don't listen to young girls' voices. We don't listen to children's voices, especially if they're brown. If they're brown, anything that comes out of their mouth, it must be a lie. Because we're just not intelligent enough to know how to form sentences to tell you we're being hurt. The quick solution would be for you to deport him, charge him, put him back on child support, do something. I'm her mother, and legally she should have stayed with me. I was so cooperative with someone who is just, he's the difficulty, not me. He even to this day has an issue with doing something as simple as family therapy because it's selfish. And when is the child's best interest ever going to be upheld? Because this is insulting to my intellect. I may be crazy, but I'm not stupid. Anyways, I don't expect any apology. It just needs to be corrected, and it shouldn't have to take me having to come to you to do it. You should just do it. As a human being, there should be something within you. If you want me to respect you in your position, I can and I will, but you're going to have to respect me as a human being, which to this day has still not been implemented. It's too much victim blaming, and it's just too much atrocities going on. Too many of my rights were violated. Every single last one of them were. It was done wrongfully, illegally. All of it. Even if the courts did everything by the book, he certainly did not. And he's just being an opportunist. Turn around and I can't see my child. I haven't seen her in 3 years. Gonna lie on me and say I kicked his door in and took my child. Open the door or answer the phone. Okay? Because it's really childish and immature. But at this point, I don't even care. He should not have any access to her. And if nobody's going to do what's right,